Well, good afternoon, Tiger Bay. My name is John Daly. I am the proud mayor of the city of Tallahassee and the perpetual first vice president of the Tiger Bay Club. I want to welcome you here today on this fantastic Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day. We have got a fabulous program for you today, a little unorthodox, not quite as funny as we usually have it. As you know, Netflix has released a new documentary series, and there's a new feature film coming out on the life and psychology of Ted Bundy. Obviously, our community has a role to play in that story, and our speaker today served as sheriff during those tense times in our community, and he is here to share his personal thoughts and experience during that time. A couple of quick notes. First and foremost, March 29th, you do not want to miss Tiger Bay. We will have the candidates for the House District 7 debate right here. Now, folks, you've been watching the news. Every other debate's basically ended in a fist fight, so this is going to be a good one. I expect to see each and every one of you here on March 29th. Let's keep up with Tiger Bay tradition. Do we have any announced candidates already for the 2020 election cycle in the House? Please stand. Judge Dempsey.
I'm a circuit judge and Tiger Bay member, and I'm running for re-election next year.
Excellent. Thank you, Judge. Do we have any other candidates in the House today? No other candidates. Judge Dempsey, thanks for joining us today. Folks, we've had a lot in the news recently. If you have paid attention to what's going on the local, state, and national level. First and foremost, we got a packed house today, and it's good to see all the guests that are here as well. Members, if you had not had a chance to pay for your guest lunch, no worries. See me afterwards. I think I still have a few free tickets from the city of Tallahassee from the sponsorship of this Tiger Bay. We'll be more than happy to take care of you, especially the ethics officer that's sitting right over here on the front table. It's good to see you, Julie. Hey, if you can't make fun of yourself, you can't make fun of other people, right? There we go. No, on a serious note, your city commission has been working extremely hard for you. In fact, as it was reported by Carl Edders, Tallahassee Democrat reporter, yesterday we took the formal tour of the police department where it became abundantly clear that we desperately need a new headquarters here in Tallahassee. The shock on all of our faces, including Carl with his mouth wide open, as we walked into the evidence room and saw firsthand thousands of pounds of marijuana stacked from floor to ceiling that has been confiscated off of the streets of Tallahassee. It was amazing. Ironically, Carl mysteriously disappeared right after that point of the tour. It has been repeated that one large cheese pizza, 2 dozen cupcakes, and a box of Slim Jims are now missing from the break room of the PD. Carl, you have questions to answer. Finally, folks, we are all sitting back and watching what's going on in the state of Virginia with their state politics and how it's completely unraveling due to photos of individuals that have served previously. And as you know, one of my own personal missions is to rebuild the relationship between the city of Tallahassee and our state government. So I'm here to announce that if we have any state elected officials that are here today, we are extending an invitation to every elected official in the Florida legislature to please come join us tomorrow night for a high school yearbook burning party at 8 p.m. at a location to be determined, and we will let you know once you RSVP. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the news I have for you. Here to introduce our keynote speaker is a gentleman who is no stranger to this club. In fact, he is a member. Jack is a native of Tallahassee, and he is the son of the late, great Sheriff Larry Campbell, who served our community with distinction. I'm here to tell you that after a fledgling career as a bouncer at Ken's Tavern on Tennessee Street and as an exotic dancer in Tallahassee, he decided to dedicate himself to the law. He has an undergraduate degree from Florida State University, his law degree from Cumberland in Alabama. He served our community for 15 years as the assistant state attorney under Willie Meggs. In 2016, we elected Jack Campbell as our state attorney for the 2nd Judicial District, representing 6 counties in North Florida. Ladies and gentlemen, my childhood friend and your state attorney, to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Jack Campbell.
there's a reason why I went into law enforcement, and a lot of it is because of my relationship with John Daly. It's tradition to call any person who served by their highest rank that they have ever achieved, and that's going to be in following today. Ken Katsaris, Sheriff Katsaris, will be referred to that for the rest of his life because he was and will always be remembered as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for Leon County. The job of sheriff is an extraordinary responsibility to the citizens, but Sheriff Katsaris rose to that level very young in life. He started back in St. Petersburg as a law enforcement officer in 1962, worked his way up and almost quickly came in 1966 to Tallahassee, to the predecessor of Tallahassee Community College, and was one of the first instructors at TCC's predecessor, what is currently the Pat Thomas Law Enforcement Academy. He has literally trained every law enforcement officer that has ever gone through that academy. He has been working in that capacity since 1999 without a salary. He has been, since his time working as sheriff, he has, as an instructor, he taught people like Chief of Police Tom Coe, Dr. Jim Murdaugh, Chief Investigator George Brand, and has literally been involved with every FHP trooper who's gone through the Pat Thomas Law Enforcement Academy. He's continued to be an instructor, and back in 1976, he was elected to be the High Sheriff of Leon County. As John has already mentioned, we sit here today on a rather somber occasion. 1 year ago today, we suffered Parkland. 2 days ago, we had the report that came out of hot yoga, and our community and the nation has taken an interest in other scars that we cover. I can tell you as a man of law enforcement, the hardest work we have to do is to work and to help the survivors of a homicide, and that's what today's topic is going to be about. We never know. It's a wonderful thing that the community serves us come up, and I've listened to it. The men and women of law enforcement sitting next to me, I'm proud to be associated with them for those things because they never know when that next incident is going to come about. But for all of Sheriff Katsaris' education, for all of his work and training, I don't think anything could have prepared any of us for the tragedies we have held or that he bestowed back on January the 15th of 1978. On that date, he was Chief Law Enforcement Officer when the murder happened at the Chi Omega House here in Tallahassee, Florida. Some of you members still remember that date. He was joined by his chief detective, a mentor of mine, a man named Jack Pottinger, who did a fantastic job of working that case. Mr. Larry Simpson was able to take the evidence that Sheriff Katsaris led and was able to secure both the conviction and a death penalty for him. Now, as Netflix is coming about and writing about this terrible tragedy, he is set to be represented on a major movie by Kevin McClatchy, a famous actor in several scenes of Tallahassee, and how we dealt with that tragedy are going to be held out for our community and our country to see. As your state attorney, I'm somewhat heartwarmed by the fact that I know that we have professionals like Sheriff Katsaris who were able to lead us through that dark storm and set the example and achieve justice. We're seeing that today with tragedies like Parkland and hot yoga, and just as we were able to move forward as a community and successfully bring forth a safe community afterwards and justice for that terrible monster, it's going to be because of people like Sheriff Katsaris and the professionalism he's demonstrated that we will move forward with today's challenges. I can tell you one of the things I most admire about him is that while this has been of great notoriety for years, you haven't seen him go out and do a public circuit and make money off this, sell books, do movies and things like that. He does that because this was a professional obligation and responsibility that he and we all still care to those families that were so tragically impacted by Theodore Bundy. So this is a rare opportunity to hear from the man who carried that awesome responsibility back in 1978, who has been a leader in our law enforcement community ever since then, and is able to walk into those new recruits and tell you, you never know when you're going to have that worst of days, but I can tell you what it was like when I did. I'm proud to call him a friend of mine. I'm proud that he was a good friend of my father's. Dad always was very jealous because Dad got to be a jolly polyester giant in 1980 on, he was able to go to Honolulu and become the chief consultant to the Honolulu Police Department every year since then. He's been recognized as an expert in criminal justice and law enforcement in every state in this union, and continues to be an expert for our community as we deal with the challenges of tomorrow. So I'd like to recognize and invite and welcome my friend, Sheriff Ken Katsaris, to speak to us today.
Tiger Bay, thank you. And to say I'm humbled is an understatement. I wasn't sure who they were talking about as I sat there. I just am proud of this community. I'm proud I chose it. I'm proud that I graduated from Florida State University, and I realized what a wonderful, golden opportunity it was to live here. And I stayed, like I'm sure about half of you did as well. This is a wonderful community to live in, and I'm just glad I'm here. I did my job on January the 15th, 1978. So this is the first time I've ever addressed that case. I never have spoken about it or written about it because I really felt I just was doing what was thrown to me to do. But before I say anything about me any longer, I want you to know that I've often thought about what occurred. And what occurred seems to me like I remember I was second chair clarinet in high school. And I remember Melvin, Mr. Melvin, our conductor. And I remembered that, you know, he was the conductor, but we made the music. And we either made good music or bad music, and he was judged by what the music was, not by how he waved the baton. So I want you to remember that I was maybe a conductor as sheriff. The accolades go to the band. The band, the captains, the chiefs, the undersheriffs, and of course, in recognition, my sheriff, your sheriff, Walt McNeil, and I'm so proud of him and the job he's done. And David, I was trying not to get him elected when he ran the first time because I was running on the ballot at the same time. And we weren't in the same county, so you want to know why I wasn't working to elect him is because I was going to be the youngest sheriff. And this 26-year-old upstart takes this 32-year-old that's in Leon County and gets elected and takes the title away from me. So, and in any event, we were young, and you know what? I'm thrilled now, looking back at my age, that we would even consider electing 26-year-olds and 32-year-olds to be sheriff. I mean, that is absolutely, I think about it and I said, did that really happen? To put that much trust and faith and honor in the hands of such young men. And now that I look at the young men and women that I train at the police academy, I'm going on 53 years and I haven't missed but a handful of recruit classes. As I look at them, I wonder, and I have faith because I knew and I know they're even better than I was. And they're going to take the baton, not the one the conductor waves, but the baton, and they're going to handle it well. Thank you for the introduction. Sheriff, thank you for joining here today. Sheriff Harvey, thank you. Sheriffs all, and the staff of the Leon County Sheriff's Office that do direct everything that the sheriff asks you to do, thank you. Because you make all of us look good and make us feel safe. I also want to mention Police Chief Michael DeLeo. I don't know, I haven't seen him. I've been talking to some other people, but if he's not here, I admire him. I want you to know that in 100 years, Leon County has only had 8 sheriffs. 100 years, 8 sheriffs. And we've had, I think, 8 or 9 police chiefs. I couldn't quite get that number. Thanks to Frank Stoudemire, who occupied both offices for a long time. So, in any event, I'm glad to be here. It's a special day. It's a special day, and you would not think this is the topic for the day. But I really thought about it, and in fact, I think you need to know I had reservations about coming in on Valentine's Day and talking about this. But then I realized something. I realized that, you know what? This is a day that we should cherish our loved ones. We should hug and kiss our family members, and we should do that every time they leave us. Because today, we're thinking back of Parkland. It happened on Valentine's Day. The Capitol is lit in orange here as a recognition of that. And all of those young, wonderful lives. I have 16 grandchildren. And I think of the possibilities of where they could be and what could happen to them. And I wouldn't want that. We've got the law enforcement to take care of that in our county, and I hope that we do. But this is a day, as we talk about the loss of loved ones, that we should remember how important those loved ones are. Don't ever let them leave you without hugging them and telling them, I love you. My closest relative today here is my great brother-in-law, who I love dearly, Spider Webb. And I'm so glad Spider was able to be here today. Thank you, Spider, for making that tremendous effort. He has done a lot for Leon County. He's a wonderful citizen, a terrific person, and I am proud to say I'm his brother-in-law. Any loss is difficult. Any loss. Let us not forget that some of you may have lost through tragedies, maybe even murder. I don't know. But we know people do. We know that people die from other mass murders. We know that people die naturally. We lose our loved ones. Any loss is important. So let us not get off talking about one case or 2 cases and think that, oh, we've talked about the tragedy. No. In our hearts, we know that there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands in the country who have single tragedies that don't even make the headlines, don't make the newspaper even sometimes. It's forgotten because it's just one. Just one. Think of that. How can we possibly think of ourselves that way, that we can stand up here and give some kind of honor? And I don't want it to be an honor, it's a dishonor for what they have done, but to say that we're talking about them. So I want to talk about something first before I ever mention the name of the person that brought me here. Don't forget Margaret Bowman, Lisa Levy, Karen Chandler, Kathy Kleiner, Cheryl Thomas. They are the names we should be talking about. And if you haven't thought about those names, because now I'll say it, the name Theodore Bundy occupies the news, put it aside or at least say a prayer for those families. I had to call my hometown, St. Petersburg, where Margaret and Lisa both lived and where her parents lived, to inform them of what occurred. I asked that the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office send a deputy out so that the phone call, the information, would be handled by someone who could give them assistance in whatever way they wanted. That was a tough night for everybody in this whole community when they woke up the next morning to find out what had happened. But you know something? There's another that we don't want to forget about. We have what is considered an unsolved crime in Leon County that began the panic of people living here, that their doors were wide open, that there were no locks, that we would send our children out on the streets with their bicycles, riding around aimlessly, going to the parks, walking by themselves. And the Sims family was murdered brutally, and I'm not going to share the details, obviously, on this day, or for the reason that it's still an open case. State Attorney, Mr. State Attorney, I love saying that to you, Jack, because I know there's a set of eyes up above that is on this table today. My dear friend, Larry Campbell, former sheriff of Leon County, who died in office, and it's the way he would have wanted it, was so proud of this son that we talked about so much. And yes, Larry did offer to carry my bags if he could go to Honolulu with me. That's a true story. We have the Sims case, Robert, Helen, and Joy, 12 years old, in Leon County, not far from the intersection of Tharp Street and Monroe. I see some of you out there. I see a little gray. I see a little bit like my condition, balding. I see a little bit of age. I see journalists who were around. You remember. Some of you don't know, but it was the case that shocked Tallahassee, shocked us into reality that, you know what, this isn't just a sleepy little town that we always cherished, that had that little beautiful building down there that was only preserved by the Secretary of State, who sat in it for I don't know how many days while the wrecking ball was ready to tear it down, and it was perched up, and I remember, and he would not leave. He said, wherever the Great Seal of the state of Florida stands, they cannot touch that place. And so be it, is what occurred, until they decided we'll make that a museum. I am so glad that that monstrous, big, tall building that doesn't have any real class to it is actually covered a little bit by that beautiful piece of architecture that we decided to keep. And something you don't know, but the patch on these officers, I designed. I designed it before the decision was made to tear down the two sides of the building and make it the 1903 version of the Capitol building. So when I came, I couldn't fit the two sides on the patch. So it just has the extensions that are there now. And the others had, if you remember, if you're old-time Tallahasseans, we had buildings on the sides of each one of those running in the vertical position. I decided I can't fit it on the patch, so I'm going to leave it like that. And then the legislature decided to tear those down. And the Tallahassee Democrat gave me credit for giving them the idea. In any event, a little historical issue and remembrance. And Walt, thank you for not taking it off the patch. I appreciate that. Larry Campbell kept it, Sheriff Boone kept it. It was new in my office. I mentioned the Sims case, Robert, Helen, and Joy, and the daughter they came home to find them. I know I'm here to talk about Theodore Robert Bundy, but I want to give you a little update because my good friend, my captain of detectives, my chief investigator, and the legal advisor to the Leon County Sheriff's Office, one of the finest of criminal justice personnel that could ever have come into government, was Jack Pottinger, who you mentioned. Jack Pottinger worked with me in those capacities and was outstanding. He also was at Tallahassee Community College, where I was department chair for 10 years, and he was a professor under me at that time, and that's why I brought him with me. One day in 1979, information came across my desk of a potential suspect in the Sims case. Robert, Helen, and Joy. Don't forget the names. We call it the Sims case. Not doing it justice. They are real people with real lives, and he had a great job in the Department of Education. We were at the Florida State football game, October 22nd, 1966. I was at the football game. Many of you were probably at that football game. And somebody was, I'm not going to say, but left them for dead. They died later. But the name came across my desk in 1979. I gave it to Jack Pottinger. We sat down and we said, that file that sits in my office, a 4-drawer file, was the murder case of the Sims murder. I had it sent to my office as soon as I was elected because I was here. I remember. I knew the panic. I saw how people reacted. The guns were being bought. The locks were flying off the shelf. People were locking their doors. People did not know what to do. Bill Joyce, a wonderful man and good friend of mine, was the sheriff at the time. Obviously, we didn't have the techniques, technology, the training, the background, the savvy that we have today. But you know what? We didn't during the murders at FSU either, because the bite mark became the central piece of evidence and the only piece of evidence that I happened to see, notice, and since at Tallahassee Community College I was the chair, I taught the courses I loved, and I was teaching the advanced forensic science concepts of criminal investigation, and I was aware of forensic odontology. It was kind of futuristic at the time. Maybe you didn't know, but it had never been used in court before. We blazed that trail, and we got the bite marks introduced into evidence, and Dr. Suvaran delivered on comparing those bites. I will tell you, if it wasn't for the fact that those canines that were so prominent in Ted Bundy's mouth were there, I'm not sure we'd have made the comparison, but he did. And he sold the jury, he sold the judge, and we got it in. Today, it's useless piece of evidence. Because if you bite somebody, what do you leave behind? DNA. Today, we take a little swab and we got it. And by the way, Ted Bundy is in the 100 million base database of individuals that are the potential for any of the cases out there that we may come across, and if something should develop that he was involved in others and they have DNA collected, which we did not use then, it can be used in the future. Back for a moment to the Sims case. I know you didn't come to hear that, but I want to tell you, I am as close to saying he did it, the name that came across, because the circumstantial evidence is so strong. And I reviewed it all again in this last week. I have the files kindly given to me by the state attorney, acknowledged by the sheriff because it's their case. Yes, I'm a deputy under Sheriff Walt McNeil. I'm proud to carry his card that says I'm a sworn officer and have arrest authority. I guess I feared after leaving the sheriff's office I needed to have that. So they've all extended it to me, and I'm proud of my affiliation. I wear my star proudly. I've never taken it off. But I want you to know, and this is the first time you're hearing this from anybody's mouth, not from Walt, not from Jack, not from the other community. I want to tell you what I think. I'm not closing the case. That's up to the state attorney. And when he sees fit, he will, if he can. There's still some thoughts of others, and they're still working diligently that case. Back to Jack Pottinger. Jack took that and ran with it and went to the prison to interview the man we believed could have done it. When Jack Pottinger showed up at the prison and walked in the cell, he said, "I know who you are." Jack and George Brand were both there. I assigned them to go to the prison. He was in prison for a very similar crime that he committed, in my possible belief, in the Sims case. Very similarly committed. I'm not going to share the kinds of evidence because it's an open file. Just say it's similar. And he said, "I know who you are." And Jack said, "Really? Who am I?" He said, "You're those investigators from the sheriff's office in Tallahassee." He said, "Really?" Now, mind you, he's locked up in jail, and this is a time when communications weren't quite like they are today. "How do you know that?" He said, "I just know." "What are we here for? Murder of that family?" "Really?" Well, Jack didn't need any more, folks. He was the consummate criminal investigator and remained that way. He took up that case and passed it off when he left the sheriff's office and went to the state attorney's office. And while at the state attorney's office, Willie Meggs, is Willie here? Willie Meggs, our esteemed state attorney for so many years and friend of mine, gave Jack the liberty of continuing that investigation as an assistant state attorney. And Jack eventually became, I believe, chief, right? And was I'm going to say he was the top prosecutor there. I'm not going to take it away from Willie, but he was the top prosecutor there in terms of he got convictions when he had conviction. When he had conviction, and he had conviction when it came down to the Sims case. And he continued to work it. And new evidence, processing evidence. Evidence is still at FDLE. The sheriff still has the deputy assigned working on the file. The state attorney, Jack Campbell, still has an assistant working the file. My good friend Jack Postinger passed away October the 31st, 2018, not long ago. And I still suffer that loss. I suffer that loss like December the 24th, 2014. You know what I mean, Jack. It's when my other chief mentor for criminal justice, Sheriff Larry Campbell, passed away. But the investigation didn't cease. It was passed on, at least partially, to me to look at again. Jack worked on it with vigor and developed a lot of good information. If nothing else, he brought it to a lot of conclusions that it's hard to go beyond the one that we identified in 1979. That man has since died. He's gone. Scum of the earth, just like Ted Bundy. And if you watch Netflix, I summed up the whole thing in the very end. They bring me back on, and I said, I hope he burns in hell. And I meant it. Ted Bundy told me when I read him the indictment, okay, Ken, what you got? Oh, you have an indictment. Sorry, arrogant. You know what? And I continued giving him the indictment reading. He said, shall I plead not guilty right now? He said, okay, Ken, that's all you're going to get. Well, let me tell you, after I left the sheriff's office, Louis Wainwright, another very dear friend of mine, I'm sure you all know Louis or have heard of him. He's the longest serving Department of Corrections secretary ever in the history of the United States, served under 5 governors, and you know what? Nobody serves under 5 governors anymore, period. But he was a powerful man, and he brought me over to the Department of Corrections to be his assistant, and he wanted me to take care of Ted Bundy on death row. Little did Ted Bundy know he was going to meet his chief enemy one more time, because he was complaining about how he was being treated at the Department of Corrections, just like he did with me. Of course, I learned my lesson from Senior Judge William Stafford, because you see, Ted Bundy sued me. He wanted outdoor exercise. He wanted typewriters. And boy, he really got me in the gut. He punched me hard when he said, I want you to take me to the Florida State University School of Law for the library because I'm my own attorney and I'm going to make my case. Now, unfortunately, I chose my words wrong before Judge Stafford, if you all know Judge Stafford. The judge said to me, he looked down, he said, Sheriff, what do you say? I said, over my dead body, Judge. God, did I learn about federal judges. He came up out of his chair and he looked down at me and he said, well then prepare to die, Sheriff. I said, whoa. I just meant I don't agree with that. But see, he kind of thought I was telling him that he can't do it because he was the one that was going to decide what was going to happen. Next thing you know, the judge is asking me for a complete inventory of my assets and finances because he was considering me in contempt of court for telling him over my dead body. Well,
I got it all together and I brought it to him, thank goodness. I mean, you know, I could have gone bankrupt over Ted Bundy. Now you know why I kept my mouth shut for the rest of the 41 years. I was afraid Judge Stafford would come back and find me in contempt. They made him a senior judge, and I said, whoa. So I had to handle that one. Anyway, Sims, I want you to rest at ease. It's not closed, and yes, there still could be, and there's another theory. And Sheriff Campbell and I went back and forth about this. We talked about it. There's another theory, but I believe, with my expertise and time in investigating, that I believe we've arrived at a point where we can say that that one is over. But until the state attorney says so, and the sheriff agrees, it's not. And I checked with both of them before I came here today to make sure that they wouldn't be in disagreement if I shared my opinion. See, that's meaningless. I'm just a deputy. It doesn't carry a lot of weight, but I believe that's the case. Now, Bundy. Some interesting facts, very quickly. In Escambia County where he was arrested, he was a pain. I'm not going to say where, but he was a real pain. He had to be interviewed at night, at a window, with a full moon, and my investigators were going nuts. They would call me up in the morning, say, Sheriff, what are we going to do with this guy? I said, well, appease him for a little while, see, maybe he's ready to talk. Well, he kept up this nonsense. That's when I intervened, and the Tallahassee Democrat headlines were something like, Sheriff says the game is over. Bundy is coming to Tallahassee, and I prepared the cell for him. A door that completely was iron steel closed, and I put 2 more locks on it. 1 big jail key and 2 big hasp locks. I think you might see it if you watch 2020 on Friday night at 9 o'clock. And I kept him in there, and he wasn't going anywhere, and I met with an orthopedic person who made a brace that put on his leg so he couldn't run because the Judge Rudd, you all remember John? He was handling the case initially, didn't want him showing up with all these shackles and chains and things, and he was bent over and he said, you know, he looks guilty. I said, well, John, he is guilty, in my opinion. He said, yeah, but we have to have a jury. Anyway, so we came up with a brace so that at least he couldn't run, and we handcuffed him like we do everybody else, but he didn't have all those chains and shackles on his legs. The indictment was read to him. Most people don't know, and I've never addressed it. You know, there was a little discussion in Tallahassee. I guess I looked like the kind of guy that could grandstand. So everybody thought so. What they didn't know is the real story. So today I'll share it. The media wanted to see that indictment read, period. They sent the attorney to my office and said that we are filing an injunction against the reading of the indictment, and we are going to file a lawsuit if you don't do it. Folks, I didn't tell the community. I just did what I had to do. I met with Judge Cowart, who was now assigned the case. Ed Cowart. Something you don't know about Ed Cowart, and you probably picked it up in his demeanor. Partner, remember? He'd use that term all the time, kind of not judge-like. He was a Miami motor cop. That's what he was prior to becoming the judge. I sat down with him and Harry Morrison, who you succeeded, and of course Willie Meggs and others before, but Harry Morrison met with me and Judge Cowart. We sat down and I said, what am I going to do? They want this indictment read and they're going to stop it tomorrow. Judge Cowart says, read that damn thing to him tonight. I said, are you sure? He said, Sheriff, it's your jail. I said, Harry? Harry says, It's your decision, and I'm with it. Go for it. Get it done. Let them look at it. You know what? The judge said, you know what? It might be good for the community to see this beast, to look at him in the eye, to say, gosh, he does look like a killer. Because the lesson we learned from Ted Bundy was that you can't trust anybody if they're handsome, groomed, charismatic, witty, charming, sweep you off your feet. He could still be going out killing people at night. And God, you wouldn't have wanted to be my daughters. I had a 1-month-old at home and a 2-year-old at home, and if you asked them how they were raised, it was worse than being the preacher's daughter. Because they really felt it. They really did. And I hugged them close all the time. I kept them close to this day. A day doesn't go by that I don't talk to my daughters. One's in Charleston, she's 43. The other one's here in Tallahassee, Natalie, and she's 41. And we talk every day. They cherish their father, and I cherish them. And I am so happy to have them. I want to give credit to Cy Deeb that you never heard about. How many of you remember Cy? He was a philanthropist. I called Cy up that night, and I said, Cy, I need a venue to operate this case out of. I don't want to do it out of the sheriff's office. He gave me the building on 7th Avenue that he had up for lease, a big building. We made it the Karamega investigation headquarters, and you probably didn't know that. All the agencies involved were terrific. The Tallahassee Police Department, Bob Mage was chief, handed it to me and said, you know, you're young and vigorous, you have a good education, handle this. Bill Tanner, former FBI agent, chief of police at Florida State University campus, said, the sheriff always handles homicides in Tallahassee, it's yours. Colonel Eldridge Beach, my good friend, turned out the police academy for me to search for that piece of wood. 55 troopers who I just finished training, because I spent 30 years training every trooper. I just finished training them on crime scene processing. He turned them out of the academy for me, and we put them all to work out there looking. We were hell-bent on finding this man, and I had a vengeance. You know why? I looked at those 2 girls on the slab when I found the bite marks, and I thought, back and forth, pictures, my daughters, those girls, my daughters, those girls, and I made a promise. It didn't make any difference what I had to do. Yeah, I got a little bit dictatorial, you're right, I did. It was only because I wanted to make this case absolutely ironclad tight. And sometimes, while I wouldn't want it in the presidency of the United States, I thought it was a good idea for the sheriff to become a little bit dictator and really run this thing with an iron fist. One person, all decisions, minor, major, and get it done. Now, did it make me a few enemies? Yeah. But guess what? You search the nation over. Search it for where a man with a bachelor's degree in psychology, a minor in criminology, 2 years of law school, and a man who operated the rape crisis phone line for Seattle, who was as tested out in the almost genius bracket, is caught, tried, convicted, loses every one of his appeals, has bite mark evidence for the first time used in the case, is televised for the first time, the first trial in history to be televised, goes to prison, and is executed within 10 years. You find me another one of those cases. They're far and few between when they involve the charisma of a Ted Bundy. I'm going to wrap up by telling you I went to death row because that was my responsibility. The women's prison, I don't know how Wainwright did this, but the women's prison I kind of had some say over down in Broward, and death row. He sent me over to death row. I'm walking down death row, and the inmates were all sitting there with their hands through the bars. I'm staying a little far away from them. God didn't want them to grab me. And I'm walking by myself, and I come to a cell. Sure enough, it was Ted's. And there's a sheet covering the entire cell. That's against the rules. The guards heard about it from me too. I grabbed the sheet, I yanked it down, and he was in there exercising facing the back wall. Ted Bundy turned around and with those penetrating eyes looked and was getting ready to say something vicious when all of a sudden he said, "Ken?" I said, "Yes, Ted." "What are you doing here?" I said, "You haven't heard?" He said, "I don't know. I'm your new keeper." Oh, God. And then I asked him the question, "Ted, tell me something. If you were in Leon County and a voter, would you have voted for me?" I was breaking the ice. Didn't know what I was going to get. He squinted his eyes, he looked up, he rolled his eyes around, he came back. He came close to me. He said, "Ken, you did a good job. Now, I'm telling you something that nobody's heard all these years." That was a confession. Nobody who is railroaded, like so many in town, would tell me, "You're railroading this guy, you just found an ex-convict who's escaped and you're blaming it on him." I heard that from, well, I'm not going to say from where. But that wasn't the case. Folks, I sucked it up. I got quiet. I stood still. I let the Tallahassee bar censure me about reading an indictment. I let everybody do whatever they needed to do. I was on a mission. I'm telling you today for the first time ever, because I've never spoken about it. And Bill, you would know about it if I did, right? Yeah, obviously. You get all the inside story on everything that happens in government. But I was on a mission to make sure that nothing happened that intervened. My personality was expendable. This community was not. So I sucked it up. I took it. I never commented during my campaign for re-election. And 41 years later, thank you, Tiger Bay, for being back. I enjoy being here. I miss you dearly. I got an invite for life to come anytime. Thank you all.